Hey, what's going on, guys? Brandon here with Texas Plinking, and forgive me if I talk a little quickly during this video because there's a lot to go over. About a year ago, I made a video on how to get into long-range shooting, and I tried to make that an abbreviated video on how to get into long-range shooting, and it ended up being half an hour long. So this is the abbreviated version of the abbreviated video. Okay, so we're gonna roll through it pretty darn quickly. Long-range shooting is my favorite form of shooting. There's plenty of good reasons to get into it, but for some people it might be intimidating, and there's just so much information out there they don't know where to start. This video, I'm going to skip over plenty of things, so I don't want to hear it. We're going to go ahead and just get to the bare basics of it. Use this video as the gateway into the drug that is long-range shooting, and go in from there. If you think I went a little too surface level on one particular thing, I promise you there is a ton of YouTube videos on that specific thing that I might skip over. But like I said, this will be the bare basics of getting to long-range shooting. So no traditional sponsor, we don't have time for that. However, I do want to give a big thanks to our new Patreons as well as our old Patreons. You guys are awesome. Without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. Let's talk about rifle selection. It divides into two pieces here. We've got semi-auto and also a bolt action. For the purpose of this video, we're gonna make everyone happy and we're gonna do both. Our semi-automatic rifle will be represented by a Palmetto State Armory AR10 Gen 3. This one here is chambered in 6.5 Creedmoor. They sell for about $1,270. I heard a lot of good things. I'm very excited to get my first impressions with it. So that will serve as our economic but still very, very capable long-range semi-auto platform. Over on the bolt action side of things, we've got the Springfield Armory 2020 Waypoint, also chambered in 6.5 Creedmoor. This is a full carbon fiber rifle that goes for about $2,200. So this will kind of serve into that medium to higher end spectrum of rifles. Coincidentally, they both happen to be chambered in 6.5 Creedmoor. I'm not a 6.5 Creedmoor fanboy. I do like the cartridge though, but if you're rocking a 223, 556, 308, 338, I don't care. You're gonna have a good time. You could even do long range shooting with a 22 long rifle. Long range is just perspective based off the cartridge you're shooting. They happen to be 6.5, so let's roll with that. Next thing to talk about is scope selection. All too often people get into long range shooting, they get the gun they're very excited about, they go over a certain look that they're after in their head, and they skimp out on the scope. They see a $20 BB gun scope and they think it's all the same, magnified crosshairs. It's just not that way. You really want to get the scope right from the get-go. I'm not saying spend the $3,000 on a Night Force or a Schmidt & Bender. You don't need to do that. But more so go after not the price point, but go after a certain feature set, and it just might set you back more than you might want to pay. I promise you'll be happy for it in the long run. Starting with the AR10, I outfitted this one here with an Arkin Optics SH4 Gen 2. It's a 6-24 by 50. The 6-24 is the zoom range, so 6 times magnification or 24 time magnification. The 50 millimeters is the objective lens. That is the front lens. The larger that is, the better it is in low light situations, brings a lot of light in. This one here has a 34 millimeter main tube. The main tube is what the rings or the scope mount goes onto. The thicker that tube is, the more elevation you can pack. So when you're clicking and dialing up for long range, when it's thicker, you have a lot more elevation, so you don't need to hold over as quickly. So for long range shooting, a larger tube is awesome. The next thing to consider is whether you're on a first focal plane or a second focal plane. Second focal plane means when you zoom in, you're only expanding the image itself. First focal plane means, of course, the image itself gets expanded, but so does the reticle. This keeps the relativity the same. So if your calculator tells you to come up 3 mils, for example, you know 3 mils will always be the same 3 mils on the scope reticle, whether you're at 6 or 24 times zoom. In short, it keeps the math a lot easier. New and experienced shooters typically will prefer first focal plane. I know I certainly do. And this scope happens to be a first focal plane, which is very helpful. Not as important, but maybe nice to have, whether it has illumination. Very important though is a zero stop. This means when you zero your scope, you bring it to the zero, but also it allows it to where it can't over travel. This is important because as you're dialing up for long range, you will cross the zero multiple times on these revolutions. When you're done shooting and you want to go back to your 100-yard zero, you want to make sure you don't over rotate and put it on the wrong zero. So you could keep on dialing until it does that hard stop right on that zero. This one has a zero stop, that's very nice. It's also got a lifetime warranty. This scope can be had for $449.99. You could also get one for $399 with a little bit less zoom, but all the other features are the same. All that being said, for under 500 bucks, this scope punches way above its class. I like it quite a bit. I have a few of them. If you guys want one, I'll put a link in the description so you guys can check it out. On the bolt action side, this one's outfitted with a Vortex Razor LHT Gen 2 4.5 to 22 by 50. Like I said, guys, I'm kind of on a mission to make this video a little bit more bite-sized, so I can't really go full in-depth on rings or mount selections and talking about leveling the scope and mounting it perfectly for you. Good thing is there's plenty of really helpful videos out there on YouTube on how to mount the scope perfectly for you individually and level it and all that kind of stuff. Otherwise, you could bring it to a gunsmith and do that, but you could do it yourself. Next, we're gonna talk about zeroing the rifles in. There's plenty of efficient ways to zero in. That's where you might just want to refer to a different in-depth video because I don't have the time on this time crunch video. But in short, let me say this. This will be a helpful piece of information. When you're dialing windage and elevation up, down, left, right, you are moving the reticle, but don't tell yourself that when you're zeroing in. If you miss right, dial left. So pretend you're telling the bullet where to go. So if you're missing way too high, dial down, bring it down. If you are way too low, dial up. You're telling the bullet to come up, although you're moving the actual reticle itself. So in short, at 100-yard range, dial until you are shooting exactly where the reticle is looking at. That sounds pretty standard, but once you do that, you're gonna realize that your elevation and your windage turrets are not on 0 anymore, they're on random numbers. What we do now is we zero the scope in. For the most part, every scope is different from each other on how this is done, but this is also the time you want to set your zero stop if you have it. Easiest way to do this, once you have your zero and you're on random numbers, just look at a quick YouTube video or the instruction manual on your particular scope, and I'll show you how to reset the zero and the zero stop. That way your scope is officially zeroed in to the rifle. Hopefully by this point you have the rifle you like, set up just the way you like it, shooting dimes at 100 yards. What's the difference between having this tack driver at 100 yards and applying it effectively to shoot well over 1,000 yards away without just lobbing it into the clouds and hoping to get lucky? This is where we start getting into the ballistic calculator. Ballistic calculators are very easy to come by. You can just go on a web browser and just type in ballistic calculator and do all the math there. Or you could go on a smartphone. That's what I do. I have an iPhone and I have an app called Bullet Drop. It was free. The information you need to plug in can be bullet weight, which you can just find on the box of ammo. You also need your ballistic coefficient. That could just be found on the website of the manufacturer of that ammunition. Pretty darn simple. The velocity. This is typically on the box of ammo, but given that this is typically a longer barrel too, best thing to do is get a chronograph, but if you don't have one, no problem. Both these guns are gonna be shooting some ammo that Hornady says flies at 2,690 feet per second. On a 24-inch barrel. This is 20, this is 22. Just a rule of thumb, don't take this too seriously. Get a chronograph at some point. I'll knock off between 15 or 20 feet per second per inch and adjust from there. But in short, a longer barrel will generate more velocity. You also need your sight height, which is the height between the center of the bore and the center of your scope tube. You're also gonna plug in your zero range. In our case, that is 100 yards. Those are the basics. A little bit more information to plug in is like your wind angle, shooting angle, temperature, altitude, barometric pressure, as well as humidity. Quick little tip for you guys, if you just have a smartphone, you can just ask, what's the barometric pressure?
The barometric pressure is currently 30.03 inches of mercury.
I don't even know what that means, but we're gonna go ahead and plug it into the ballistic calculator. With everything plugged in correctly, it will show us our drop in mils, minutes, or inches, depending on what you have. These scopes happen to be mils, so in mils, let's just pretend at 500 yards, it's telling me to come up, let's just say 2.7. So let's dial. Let's just pretend it's a great day, no wind. And at 2.7, I am shooting way too high. Now at this point, this is when I will come down some until I get hits. This is where it's nice to know that the ballistic calculator is not the end-all be-all answer. It is simply a suggestion. I might go ahead and retune what I put in as far as velocity on my ballistic calculator until it lines up with, let's say, 2.4 is what I was actually doing at 500 yards. Now this is only 500 yards. You want to confirm this with as much as possible. Try 300, try 500, try 700, try 1,000, whatever you want to shoot with your cartridge if it allows it. And then that's where you're going to get the most solid information is through a lot of testing. This is what you want to write down. That is called your DOPE chart. DOPE is an acronym for data of previous engagement. That is gonna help you big time. If you wanna be all cool, you could write it on the side of your gun with tape, put it on the flip up cap. That's what I like to do. Or just have it on your phone. But that is how you're gonna be able to whip out the gun out of your gun bag and get a cold bore first round hit at 1,000 yards and impress all your friends. Again, ballistic calculator is a suggestion. You're gonna wanna write it down per gun. Everything's a little bit different. That round, that gun, everything. And hopefully you have a repeater. And if you have that, you're gonna have a good time. There is so much information to cover. This was just hopefully the gateway to get you guys excited about getting into long range. Hopefully you go out after making this video with your current setup or build a new one and stretch the legs on it. It's a pretty good time. But with that said, I already have a video on this setup here live. I'll put that somewhere here. And the Palmetto State barely got featured in this video, but I will have a full independent review and just blasting around video next month with this setup. But I'm looking forward to it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys very soon. Take care.